Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidtless Live. I am your host, Kurt Schmidt. I am so happy that you are joining me today because we're going to be talking about all things healthcare messaging and the consumer revolution happening in healthcare. It's very interesting to see these large, giant corporations all of a sudden having to scramble to figure out how to talk to people. So we're going to be talking to one of those experts, Sara. She's joining me today. But before we get started, I do have to mention that we are hiring at Foundry. Yes, that's right. We are hiring. You can check out our careers page at foundrymix.com/careers. It's a great place to work. You should check it out. It's fantastic. It's amazing. Speaking of amazing, let's talk to Sara. Sara, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Kurt. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so tell me about the work you do and where you're at these days.
Yeah, so I am the president of Inprela Communications. We are a storytelling and a content strategy firm with deep roots in public relations. Our elevator pitch is we're exceptional storytellers who excel at building relationships that matter and opening new doors for brands. We help our clients sharpen their message, build influence, and ultimately build trust.
It's great. How did you get into this line of work? Were you a young woman saying, "Well, I can't wait to grow up and do healthcare messaging"? Scribbling in your notebook as a child. Different types of messaging.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I certainly didn't grow up knowing what public relations was, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not one of those professions that you grow up reading about in a textbook in high school, right? But what I did know about myself was number one, that I, at a very early age, loved artistic expression of all types, right? Whether it was doing arts and crafts or, doodling or dance or anything like that. It was sort of more of the artistic expression. And the older that I got, I also realized that I had a gift for the written word as well, a passion for writing. I won an essay contest at a really young age on the topic of democracy of all things.
That's
and,
awesome.
And then the third thing, I think, we all realize about ourselves what we're good at based on what other people tell us, and particularly at a young age. And my parents would tell me, you're really persuasive. You're really good at passionately convincing people to get on board with your ideas. You should be an attorney someday. You should stand in front of a judge and a jury and convince people. And so I think for a while I thought I wanted to be an attorney. The creative side, I considered advertising. The writing side, I considered journalism. And that's actually ultimately the direction that I went in. I thought I wanted to be a journalist. And fortunately, I guess, I ended up in the journalism department at the University of St. Thomas. And when I learned about, picking a major, public relations was one of the majors that they offered. And I had no idea this was a thing. And lo and behold, it's the intersection of those three things: creativity,
Yes.
and writing, and being persuasive. And like I said, I didn't know that those three things existed in a profession and a career. And I feel very fortunate to really kind of have found my way into a job that I think I was meant to do. And I really love doing it.
So did you find that, because the world has changed a lot in terms of PR. I used to, when I was growing up and in college and things, PR was, newspapers and the news and things that would get, but now, thanks to social media and all these different things, how have you seen PR change since those early days when you were, when you were first entering?
Yeah, I think some things have changed and some things haven't changed, right? I think the channels that we have available to us certainly have changed, right? Everything is very digitized, and it's also real time with social media, right? And so those things certainly have evolved over time, and it's less about standing on a podium and saying, "Let me tell you how great I am as a company. Let us tell you how great we are, and look at all of our great products." And it is more about stories of real people and authenticity that, again, happens in real time. And I would say that PR today is always on. I think, back in the day, you could control that a bit more and have certain events or announcements that you wanted to make sort of on your own time. And again, it was standing at that podium and getting to do that. And today it's always on. and it's definitely much more integrated than it was when I first started out in the profession as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I just watched the movie 13 Days the other day, and there's a scene where Kennedy calls the newspaper chief to be like, don't run this story because it'll get Americans killed and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like thinking, you can't do that. You can't call the head of Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, and say, don't publish that thing because, it's, so to your point, yeah, PR is always on. And do you feel that some of the people, the clients you worked with, that's been a learning curve for them over the years?
Yeah, I think it is
Yeah,
a learning curve, and I think some companies have embraced it and do well with that, and others, it's still a learning curve, right? I think that the other elements of not only the only always on part, but the integrated part of it as well, right? I mean, you just look at how corporate communications is sort of siloed inside of large corporations as well, separate from the marketing departments. That right
yes,
there is an opportunity to better integrate,
right,
right? And I think we're seeing that in some of the large corporations that we work with. They're starting to sort of remove those silos and better integrate those teams. But yeah, I think there are still some sort of old legacy things that kind of need to continue to be pushed and modernized for
yeah.
sure.
I think that's really interesting because it is, we've talked about digital transformation on the show and what that means, and in a lot of cases, it's exactly what you're talking about: is breaking down those silos between these organizations and connecting them. Digital channels can help with that, but really there's not that much digital about the transformation. It's just digital is happening in the world and we're being it's happening to us, right? So how do you respond to it, right? But you can't really go and sell a CEO of a large company digital responsiveness or something like that, right? So when you're first entering in and the type of work you do, I mean, are you doing a lot of auditing up front? And like how are you getting in and helping these folks with their messaging when it comes to healthcare specifically? Because it is such a highly regulated industry, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll touch on the healthcare bit a little bit just to provide some context of the type of work that we do inside of healthcare, and then I'll speak to your point about like what do we do sort of in the initial stages with the client, whether that's auditing or what it is. So I get to spend my days consulting some of the most disruptive healthcare startups that are changing the future of healthcare. It's really exciting work. Clients typically will come to us because they have a specific need, and oftentimes that's building awareness. And so we enter into that conversation designing a program that, of course, is going to meet that need of building awareness. But as
Yeah,
we get into it, we will, in every situation and every company client is different. They're going to have their own sort of challenges that may prevent us from getting where we need to go. And it isn't really just, Kurt, it isn't just about building brand awareness. It is about building trust,
sure.
particularly in healthcare. And you mentioned in the lead in the transformation that's coming in terms of the consumer revolution. I mean, it really is going to be about trust. And so, again, I think sometimes companies or brands may be thinking of it in terms of a specific need that they have for building awareness, and we need to sort of bring them along in the understanding that it is bigger than that. It is about trust, and it's a long game that you certainly need to play. And so,
Right.
while there may be a certain event, a timely opportunity, or an announcement that needs to be made, we need to be thinking about this bigger picture and how are we going to be communicating with their publics, consumers included, inside of that, to build trust over the long term.
Makes sense. To that point, how does that messaging, I mean, how does your process work inside those? Because you're talking about startups, but they're just as regulated as some of these larger companies, right? They're still dealing with the same regulations. How does your organization, how does your process uniquely adapt to those regulations? Because you got to be, well, I mean, to your point, you want to build trust, but the regulations only allow you so much transparency. Isn't that right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's interesting. Everyone always talks about sort of the regulatory environment inside of healthcare, and it certainly is something that you have to be aware of. But there aren't the way that I look at it, that much differences between say a tech company, a manufacturing company, and a healthcare company, right? At the end of the day, you need to focus on why a purpose-driven message, why you exist from a mission, vision, core values standpoint,
Right.
and build the narrative around that. So when you talk about process of where do we start, we pull all of that back, right? We look at the existing branding framework, messaging framework that's there, and typically there's often a missing element of that, which is this thought leadership narrative. Some people call it a purpose-driven narrative that we help our clients develop from the very, very beginning. And it's not just about developing that, Kurt, but it's also the ability to execute well
Right.
against that,
Right.
and to be able to deliver that message well and authentically.
Put your money where your mouth is, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so how do you build that trust at scale, right? Because again, it's like you're going in. Is it one on one? Is it how do you work to scale that?
Yeah. So I would say, in terms of a key strategy that you need to have, is it needs to be about education, right? Is one of the things that you need to be thinking about.
Mm,
Is we're talking about if we're talking about being in a consumer empowerment phase, which probably need to kind of back up a little bit and talk a little bit more about that, but I'll answer your question.
sure.
PR's job is to educate, right? So whatever category of health you're in, making education one of your key marketing strategies to support growth is really important. And start by making a list of the gaps between what people believe today and what we need them to believe in order to affect a lasting change, and then develop an education strategy around that. Whether it's a public awareness campaign, or it is one-to-one. There are opportunities to certainly do it more broad scale or in more of a one-to-one environment. I think depending on your business model, depending who your target audiences are, I think you need to be considering potentially both or one of those strategies that may be better for your particular business.
Mm-hmm.
But education is really, really key, and you need to make sure that you're um, helping people see this transformation opportunity that is coming.
Yeah. Well, back to that point about the consumer revolution, it's this on demand aspect of that education as well, right? It's not, I'm going to wait for you to publish or give me a trifold brochure at my next visit. I want it on demand. I want it on my phone. I want it at 10 o'clock at night. Right? Isn't that a big part of
Absolutely.
it?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think pretty advertisements and brochures certainly have their place, right? But consumers are incredibly savvy, and they're not going to necessarily trust everything that a company says, right? So we have to think about doing that, and earning our way into the conversation through voices that are trusted, right? So who are those trusted voices, right? What are those trusted channels? Certainly your customers themselves. So taking a look at telling customer impact stories, giving people
Mm,
proof, right, that your solution, your innovation is going to make a difference for them. And also looking at people with authority. What does that mean? It means industry experts. It could be journalists. That could be one.
sure.
It could be academics. Basically, people who make a living by educating other people who are not being paid to represent your brand, right? You've got to earn your way in. So we help our clients earn their way in by effectively building relationships with other people who are trusted.
Yeah, I love that. And again, it's back to these are things that they probably already have as part of their value statement and their mission and things, but they just they can miss those directions, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think about sort of I hate calling it mistakes, but common sort of pitfalls that companies or brands will
Yeah.
make from a messaging perspective, particularly in healthcare. One is a message that's too hard to understand, right? They just haven't figured out how to talk about it or explain it in a more approachable way. That's what we help our clients with. Another one pitfall that is common with entrepreneurs, I would say, is loving an idea or a message that doesn't actually resonate with your audience.
Mm,
You might think it's a great message, but does the buyer care? right?
Yep.
And we need to really unpack that. Sometimes it's actually talking to some of the buyers so that we can understand their point of view and make sure we're developing the messaging in light of that. It can also be then testing the message once we've developed it, right, based on those conversations and a smart approach. Then we'll actually go out and test it. Another pitfall would be playing it safe or trying to please everybody,
Right.
right?
Trying to be as
And
vanilla as possible.
yeah, it's a safer approach, and not being willing to take a stand on some of the most pressing issues that their industry faces. In healthcare, whether that's affordability or access to care, that's what their customers care about. People, we've seen the statistics and the studies. People want to spend money with brands that are willing to take a stand, and frankly, that's what employees care about too. So
Right.
it's not just good for marketing and sales, but it's good for recruitment. I know you mentioned that the Foundry is hiring. We're hiring, right? It's a
Yep.
tough market right now for finding great talent. And so it's not just a great marketing strategy to have this purpose driven message, but it does also support bigger business opportunity and recruitment as well.
I see. I love that you said that because it's something that we've really focused on a lot over the years is that we understand our marketing is not just for potential customers, but it's for potential employees as well. And we always put it through both of those lenses. And to your point, yeah, in the last few years, it's become even more increasingly important because, we're a tech company and people are choosing to work with us, not necessarily because of the tech and the work, but because of the environment and the opportunity. We're a fast growing company and people like to be a part of that. And so reflecting that in our marketing is not necessarily for our customers. Our customers really could care how much we're growing, but it's really, it's really important. It's really important that the potential employees and people can see that. So it's not just about putting out there, hey, look at this new app we just have designed or things like that. It's about what's the impact we're having on the culture and the community, right?
Totally. And I've taken a look at the Foundry website, and I'll give you a compliment. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job of this, right? You're talking about, um, so I want to unpack purpose-driven messaging for a second. I don't mean
Yeah.
this just in an altruistic sense, right? I mean it from a mission, vision, core values. What matters to your company? What
Right.
impact are you looking to make in the world? Why do you do what you do, and why should I care? You've got to have that narrative, and it's a big gap for many brands today. It sounds really intuitive and easy, Kurt, but it's not. It's hard work. Um,
It's not easy.
you're right. There's a reason why there's so many books written about purpose-driven marketing, right, on this
Yeah.
particular topic. And not only do you have to have the narrative established, but going back to my earlier point, you have to be able to tell it really, really well and authentically without selling. Otherwise, people won't trust you, right? So going back to this theme of trust, it's not your story; it's their story. It's the consumer story. It's telling the story of the problems that you solve through the lens of and the voice of those that you solve it for. It's not hey, look how great my product is, and I think most people understand that, right? But it comes down to how
Sure.
do you actually do that well?
Well, and again, it's something that we have struggled with in that messaging is because they always say you're so close to something, so you can't see it
Yes.
as well, right? And we definitely struggled, and I can sympathize with your clientele. It's in the healthcare industries because I do want to keep what we do simplified, but it is complex work and it is detailed work. So I feel that as a business owner, that explaining some of the complexity gives more valid or value to it or something. But then on the flip side, I mean, just recently we went through an episode where we had somebody go and interview a bunch of our current clients. Like, what do you think of Foundry? What do you think of these sorts of things? And what came back
Great
was
idea.
totally not what we what we talk about as an organization, and it was really eye opening. And so, that sort of process of honestly, I hate to say it, but just getting over yourself a bit,
Yes.
in saying it in the nicest way to a client, I'm sure has to be a part of your process as well, right?
Yeah, and it is hard, especially because we are so close to it, and there's a lot of pride, right? And a lot of these things, whether you're part of a large corporation, that there's some, legacy messaging that has long been held onto, or an entrepreneurial startup company, that it is very personal, right, for the founders of
Yep.
that organization. But I think you're right. There's a little bit of sort of like humble pie, right, where we sort of
Yeah.
look in the mirror and realize, like, oh, okay, this way that we're talking about it actually isn't well understood, or there could be a simpler way. And I think it's really smart that you guys did what you did, which is talking to your customers. We do that for a lot of our clients, and it certainly provides a North Star for where you should head from a messaging strategy standpoint. Um, and I just, we shouldn't have to think hard to understand what a company is saying. How often, we've all experienced this, right? You
Yeah.
go to a website, company website, and you're like, okay, okay, I see the list of services, but what do they actually do, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I think we make that mistake all too often, in many industries, but in healthcare, it's especially hard. I mean, just take health insurance as one example. How many Americans really understand what a deductible is? I know some really smart people who struggle at defining what a deductible is. And if we're going to succeed in putting the consumer at the center of healthcare and really leaning into this revolution that I think is coming, we can't have that. We
Yeah.
can't have people that don't understand, what action we're looking for them to take. And even worse, if they don't understand it, they might feel isolated or feel like we're not an advocate for them as a
Right.
company or a brand, and then therefore, an unwillingness to trust us
Yeah, that's a really
with their
important
help.
point, right? That is that you don't want to feel like you're talking down to folks, because you are the experts in this complex, highly regulated field, and you're explaining what action you want them to take. And to your point, yeah, if you make it seem like, well, I'm sorry, you're just not smart enough or good enough to be to join us, even though they clearly are not, and they don't mean to come across that way. But if we experienced this early on, if you're writing and you're just as concerned about what your peers or competition is saying versus what that person is actually looking for, you're going to find yourself very quick being confusing and turning off people.
Totally. Yep, I totally agree. And we're all busy, right? We don't
Yes.
have time to take three extra clicks to try to understand,
Right.
right? In healthcare, we actually are talking about people's lives, right? We don't want someone to be in a situation where they're preventing getting care because they don't understand the right way to navigate or get access to what they need to, or frankly, what it's going to cost them. And unfortunately, that's a reality in many elements of healthcare in America today. But I think we're at a point now where a change is coming.
Yep.
There's a lot of venture capital dollars flowing into healthcare right now. A lot of innovations that are being built. But what I see as the most important factor in driving change is actually the consumer coming to understand the power that they have. And that's why I say I think we're on the cusp of a consumer revolution. And
Yeah.
I think COVID has actually accelerated that
Yes.
revolution.
100%.
We're getting to a point where consumers are going to be able to leverage their buying power in a way they've never done before. We're starting to remove some of the classic barriers, making it easier for consumers to make their own decisions. Things like the federal price transparency rule that goes into effect early in the year,
Mm.
digital health technologies that are being built. It's giving consumers access, easier access to information. Maybe it
Yeah.
was information that was there all along, but I couldn't find it as a consumer, right?
That's really important point what you just said, because most of the healthcare projects that we've worked on in the last 18 months has been that data exists, but they don't have the access to it, or they need better access to it, or even just accessibility in general.
Totally. Yep.
So, just accessibility in general to those things has been a huge part of the work that we've been doing.
Yes, yes, and it's really important work because, and again, this is why education is so important, because this consumer revolution won't happen unless consumers really realize the power that they have, right? And so they either don't realize the power they have or haven't been in a position to leverage the power. What happens when we can actually leverage that power, right? Consumers will begin to speak with their pocketbook and start demanding higher quality care at a lower cost. And as a result of that, provider competition will increase. Incentives then begin to get realigned around what's best for the consumer. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't sit here, pretending like all this is going to change overnight, right? This is difficult work that many in the industry have been working a long time to
Sure.
change.
Yeah.
But I think the point of the conversation is that I think consumers are waking up and realizing the power that they have, and we need to, as companies in healthcare, make sure that we're leaning into that. And I will also say, Kurt, whether your sale is B2B or B2C, this movement will impact you, and
Yep.
you need to be prepared for it. I mean, a lot of the work that we do is more B2B than it is B2C, but even in a B2B sale, you've got to be focused on the consumer.
Well, and that's to your point that B2B world has changed too, because people have always looked at it as, well, the consumer. When I think of B2C, it's that couple walking through Target or something, and that's the C. And then the B2B is, well, we're at a trade show and we've got a booth and there's some white guys with cigars just sitting around, like, and I got to get in good with them and whatever, right? But it's those people are walking around Target too. those B2B people are just out and about as well. They're just people. Just because you call it B2B doesn't mean that you're talking to them necessarily solely as a business entity, right?
Yes, it's B2P, as they say, right?
Ah,
Business to
there you go.
person, right? Right. Yeah, and I think the other interesting, powerful case for why it does need to be B2P is look at who's getting in. Look who's getting into healthcare. Walmart is getting into healthcare,
Yeah,
right? Now, CVS has been in healthcare as a pharmacy, but they are getting into the care delivery business in a
right.
much bigger way than they have. And so there's a tremendous amount of business opportunity there. And you now have these entities that have a long-standing history providing an exceptional consumer experience, right? They've been there, done that. They understand what it takes to deliver an exceptional consumer experience, and they're going after this
Right.
business
Well,
opportunity.
they're the country's largest employer, so when they're stepping their toes into something, that should really tell you something. They don't do anything kind of just as a whim.
Right, and so part of the reason why I bring this up is again, not only is this not going to happen overnight, but also this is not just marketing isn't going to solve these problems, right? This is a business challenge. It needs to be a business priority to be focused on this consumer empowerment opportunity. I think the brands and companies that understand that are the ones that are going to win.
Yeah.
And think about being a legacy healthcare company going up against and competing head to head with a Walmart, right? How are you going to compete, right?
Right.
That the consumer, and I don't mean that like you can't compete. I don't mean to
Sure.
sound
Sure.
Debbie
Yeah.
Downer about it. I'm just saying you've got to start making some really intentional decisions and smart strategies now that are going to get you
Mm,
there. And you really need to be thinking about how to deliver that rich consumer experience. Look at every aspect of your consumer experience. Figure out how to make it more convenient, more frictionless. And I've seen some great data from Forrester to illustrate that there's revenue growth potential, employee satisfaction, the ability to charge a premium price all increase when you adopt a consumer-centric mindset. So
mhm.
there's plenty of data out there to show that this is the direction that we need to run in. And again, I think COVID has just accelerated this conversation
Yeah.
and making it all the more important.
Yeah. Yeah. To that point, it's pretty amazing to see how, I mean, there's so many examples of this that people just seem to just overlook. I mean, you look at like Warby Parker, for example, and how they sort of democratized eye care or eyeglasses. And yeah, you could talk whether or not it's a great product or whatever. It doesn't matter. What the point is that there's like two or three places that just own the eyeglasses industry, and they were coming and they were like, yeah, we're going to disrupt this. And those people just kind of laughed them off. And now, now look at them. They're trading higher than in a lot of those areas than most of those people are. So to that disruptor point, if you think, well, everything that got us here will get us to the next level, and the way we've talked about it up until this point got us here, why do we need to change now? I mean, to your point, if you don't see that revolution, that it is here, and just accelerating, because just like you said, COVID has been an accelerator. Like a lot of people think, oh, but I saw Best Buy do projects in 3 months that would have normally taken through 3 years, curbside pickup and all those sorts of things. Like in 3 months, boom, they got it going,
Yep. Yep. That's another great example. A couple of the other, companies that I think are doing it well,
Yeah.
not both from a business strategy perspective, but also from a marketing perspective that I think have really nailed their marketing message. Um, and neither of these are Emprela clients. I didn't want to go down that path. I wanted to think about this more from an aspirational standpoint.
Sure.
First one is Folks Health. It's FOLX Health. They're a digital healthcare service provider for the LGBTQ plus community. Go to their website, you'll see exactly what I'm saying. They're doing all the things that we're talking about. They're making health messaging easily approachable. They're channeling their mission and their purpose. And the other one is Walmart. I keep coming back to Walmart, but I do think they're doing an exceptionally good job, both from a business strategy standpoint, as well as the marketing and the stories that they're telling.
Yeah, I agree. You're seeing a lot of those examples, and just because it's it's not easy to think of that, because again, back to your point, a lot of people they've built their businesses on these types of messaging, and it's worked for them in the past. It's hard to think about that change, even when it's staring you straight in the face, even when the customer is demanding it. They're writing emails, they're posting on social media, they're sharing their stories on Facebook, right?
Yeah, and I think this is a great point. I think it can be hard to go all in, right? I think we see it. I think we see it as an opportunity. I think we still live in a little bit of a world where we're looking for marketing to deliver a quick win, right? And what we're talking about here is more of a long game. We're talking about this goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about, sort of the shift in PR over time as being more sort of event driven to now being always on. And I think that companies and brands need to embrace that it is this long game. We want that quick and immediate results, and PR certainly can deliver that. But
Yeah.
what we're actually talking about here from a trust standpoint has to be a very intentional long game and strategy. And the CEO needs to understand that, and as well as the marketing leader.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think it does take exceptional sort of high performing marketing leader that can help um, pave the path for that conversation, right? I've had these conversations directly with the CEO, and I think they get on board with the idea of it, but then they struggle with the how do I make sure our organization is ready to sort of operationalize around
Yeah,
that?
the
I think,
execution, right?
right. I've had the conversation and I can see them going, well, this is way bigger than marketing, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, yes, it is way bigger than marketing, but marketing is a big part of it, right? And
Yep.
these are really smart, successful people, right?
Well, of
But
course.
we're
Yeah.
again trying to connect the dots between um, really going all in on purpose driven and what that means to the organization, right? What it means to your sales narrative, not just your marketing narrative or this campaign that we're going to run for the
Yeah.
next 3 months. I think that can be a bit more abstract or harder for a CEO to get their brain
For
around. And
sure.
that's where a marketing leader sort of needs to come in and share that same vision and work sort of collectively with us to figure out how we're going to operationalize against that.
Yep. That totally makes sense because it's similar with us. We will get, somebody will contact us and be like, I want to do an app. And I'm like, maybe you shouldn't do that app, but let's go ahead and find out what you're dealing with. And then to your point, what we soon discover a lot of times is that it's a much larger silo tearing down conversation that needs to happen in order to achieve what the actual goals of the CEO, the business, and the people want to do versus, well, how can I just use the same pieces to get the same result? To your point, exactly. It ends up being a broader conversation very quickly.
Totally. And it's not, I'm sure you've been in this situation too, Kurt. We're willing to do that app, right? Which for us
Sure.
might be a press release, right? We'll
Yep.
do that.
Yep.
And we're still going to
Yep.
have the very frank and candid conversation around what that bigger opportunity is and what it's going to take to get there. We're also very, though, empathetic and compassionate about the hard work and the time that it's going to take to get there, but we will walk with them as a partner through that journey. I have had clients, I will set aside that sort of push for where I believe the brand needs to go if they're not ready for it.
Yep.
And I have had clients come back 12 months later, even 24 months later, and say,
Yep. Yep.
you
We're
were
ready for
right.
that now. Yep.
You're right. And again, it's not, I don't say that as an ego play. I say that as
No.
it can take time.
Yep. I've
Right.
had the same experience. Yeah. People showing up 2-3 years later saying, okay, now I get it. And back to your point about trust, it's that they've got to trust that you're the person that can help them through that time. Just like we were saying, the consumer needs to trust that employer as well. So,
And in the meantime, that specific client that I'm thinking of, we still were working with them for that,
right.
24-month period.
Yeah. Yep.
They just got to that readiness as a
Yep.
business and a brand that, yep, that is the direction that we need to run
Yep.
in.
Yep. We gotta spackle some holes first here, and then we can
Right,
paint the
right.
whole place again.
Right. And I get it, right? Especially with these startup organizations, right? Sometimes we're brought in, we're working directly with the CEO. There is no marketing department, and that infrastructure needs to be built, right? Because you can't run an integrated campaign without, some level of digital marketing automation, right?
Right.
Whatever that looks like. And that takes time to build, let alone building the brand as well. So,
Right. Yep. No, it does. All right. So I want to thank you for your time today. I did want to show off the site here, and you can check out Emprela and the work that they do there. Beautiful site, great messaging, and I also really like the blog too. By the way,
thank you.
I think it's really well. I think it's really well done. So if I want to know more about the work you do, Sara, and where can I go and connect with you and your team?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Sara Payne. And you can also reach me via email at Sara, Sara, at Inprela, Inprela.com. And the rest of our team on LinkedIn as well.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time for the conversation today. I value your insights, and this is an important time for the work that you do. And I'm glad you're out there sharing the information with folks.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kurt. This was really fun.
Thank you. So, everybody, just to reiterate, we are hiring at Foundry, and if you want to go to a place that is pretty, I would say, consumer site. You heard Sara; she gave us a compliment. She said our site was good, right? I mean, I'm just going to take that clip out and I'm going to share that with our marketing team. No, it's good. But check out foundrymakes.com/careers. And I appreciate you taking the time today. It's been an interesting week, but we've got more live shows next week. So stay tuned. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button and smash all the buttons like the kids say. Thanks.